I stood in my son's driveway with 2 suitcases and a cat carrier. And I watched my daughter-in-law lock the front door from the inside, while my son just stood there in the window, not even pretending he hadn't seen me. My own son, 31 years old, raised in my house, fed at my table for 18 years, and he let his wife turn the deadbolt on me like I was a salesman who wouldn't take the hint. I stood there for a long moment in the cold, and then I picked up my bags, and I said 3 words out loud to nobody but myself. Remember this moment, that's what happened. Here's how I got there. My name is Vivian, and until 14 months ago I would have told you I had a good life. Not a glamorous one, but a good one. I'd spent 26 years as an administrative coordinator at a regional hospital system in Ohio. The kind of job where nobody ever thanks you, but everything falls apart if you're not there. I had a modest house with a leaky gutter I kept meaning to fix, a Honda with 140,000 miles on it, and a husband named Roger who I'd been married to for 31 years. Roger and I had 2 children. Our son Carter was 31, married to a woman named Imogen, working in commercial real estate, the kind of man who measured success by square footage and quarterly numbers. Our daughter Felicity was 26, still finding her footing, working retail while she figured out what she wanted from a graphic design degree she'd taken out loans for. I loved them both fiercely and differently, the way you do. Roger had a stroke on a Tuesday in March, 14 months ago. He survived it, but not in any way that resembled the man I married. The left side of his body never fully came back. His speech was slow and effortful, the words there but stuck behind a door that wouldn't fully open. He needed help dressing, help in the bathroom, help with almost everything that used to be automatic. I became a caregiver overnight. On top of being a wife, on top of still trying to work enough hours to keep our insurance intact. I won't pretend the marriage had been perfect before that. Roger had always been a little distant, a little more married to his job at the plant than he probably realized. But after the stroke, something in him narrowed even further. The frustration of his own body betraying him came out sideways, sometimes at me, sometimes at nobody. I understood it. Understanding it didn't make it easier to live inside. For 11 months I did everything. I learned how to transfer a grown man from a bed to a wheelchair without hurting either of us. I learned which pharmacy filled prescriptions fastest, which physical therapist actually listened, how to fill out FMLA paperwork in my sleep. I lost 18 pounds without trying. The kind of weight loss that worries people who see you regularly, except nobody saw me regularly anymore because I didn't have time to be seen. Roger died in April, almost a year to the month after the stroke. A second cardiac event, sudden in his sleep. I found him in the morning. I won't describe that morning. Some things are too specific to hand to strangers. What I will tell you is what happened after. Because that's the part nobody warns you about. The part where you think the hardest year of your life is over, and you discover it was actually just the warm-up. The house, it turned out, had been refinanced 2 years before Roger's stroke. A decision he'd made without fully looping me in. The kind of thing you don't notice until you're sitting across from a man named Gary at the bank, explaining that the equity wasn't what I'd assumed, and the mortgage payment, now resting entirely on my single income, was going to be a serious problem. I'd been a stay-at-home mother for the first decade of our marriage, and even with 26 years at the hospital, my salary alone wasn't built to carry a 4-bedroom house in this economy. I did the math more times than I want to admit, hoping it would come out different. It never did. I called Carter first. He was my son, he was successful. He understood real estate, mortgages, numbers, all the language I was suddenly drowning in. I told him I might need to sell the house, that it could take 3 or 4 months to find a buyer and close, and that I was hoping, just hoping, I could stay with him and Imogen for a stretch while it sold. I wasn't asking for charity. I told him I'd contribute to groceries. I'd help with anything around the house. I just needed a roof while mine sold out from under me. There was a pause on the line, the kind that has an entire conversation happening inside it that you're not part of. "Mom," he said, "let me talk to Imogen. I want to tell you that I wasn't worried in that moment, but I was." Imogen and I had never been close in the easy way some mothers and daughters-in-law managed to be. She was polite, at holidays efficient, the kind of person who color-coded her pantry and considered that a virtue. I'd never disliked her. I'd just never quite been let in. Carter called back 2 days later. He told me they had a lot going on, that Imogen was stressed about the spring listing season at her firm, that their guest room was technically being used as a home office now. He said maybe I should look into Felicity's place instead, since she had more flexibility. Felicity had a 600-square-foot apartment with a Murphy bed and a roommate. I didn't say that, I said. Okay, I understand. I did not understand. Not really. But I'd raised that boy to be polite, even when he was being cruel. And apparently it had worked too well. Because he delivered the rejection in the gentlest possible voice. Like that, made it kinder. I called my mother next, Eleanor, 83, sharp as ever, living alone in a senior community, 2 states away in a unit with exactly 1 bedroom and a strict no extended guests policy in her lease. She offered what she could, which was sympathy and a standing invitation to call her every night. Which I appreciated and which solved absolutely nothing about where I was going to sleep. I have a sister, Priscilla, 4 years older than me, married into money the old-fashioned way, a big house outside Columbus with a guest wing that genuinely sat empty most of the year. I called her, I told her everything, the house, the mortgage, Carter, all of it. Oh, Viv, she said. And there was real sympathy in her voice, which made what came next worse. You know Desmond's mother is staying with us right now. Recovering from her hip thing. It's just not a good time. Desmond's mother had been recovering from her hip thing for 11 months. I knew this because Priscilla posted updates about it on social media with alarming regularity. I drove to Carter's house anyway, 3 weeks after that first phone call, because the closing date on selling the house had moved up faster than expected, and I had 11 days to be somewhere else. I called ahead. I want that understood clearly. I called, I told him I was coming. I told him I needed an actual answer, not a soft no dressed up as a maybe. He texted back, come by around 6, we'll figure something out. I packed my 2 suitcases, the practical things, not the sentimental ones. Those went into a storage unit I was paying for by the month with money I didn't have to spare. I brought my cat, Marigold, 14 years old, mostly deaf, completely uninterested in change. I drove the 40 minutes to Carter's subdivision. The nice one. The one with the stone-faced houses and the landscaping that all matched like the whole street had hired the same designer. Which, knowing that neighborhood, they probably had. I parked in the driveway behind Imogen's SUV. I got out. I got Marigold's carrier out of the back seat. And I walked up to that big front door with the etched glass panel. And through the glass I could see Imogen standing in the front hallway. She looked at me. She looked at the suitcases. And she turned the deadbolt. I stood there for a second, not understanding. The way your body sometimes lags behind your mind in registering something cruel. Then I saw Carter in the front window, just past the hallway, standing very still, and he did not come to the door. He looked at me through the glass for 1 full second, maybe 2. And then he stepped back out of view. I knocked, nobody answered. I knocked again, harder, and I heard faintly, through the door, Imogen's voice saying something I couldn't fully make out except for the words boundaries and, not our responsibility. My son's voice, lower, said something back. I couldn't hear what. I stood on that porch with my dead husband's widow's grief, still raw in my chest, with a cat carrier in one hand and 2 suitcases at my feet. In front of the house I had helped pay the down payment on 12 years earlier. When Carter and Imogen were newlyweds without enough saved for a starter home in this market. Nobody opened the door. I picked up my bags. I walked back to my car. I put Marigold in the back seat, and I sat behind the wheel for a long moment in that pristine driveway, in that subdivision where every lawn looked like it had been ironed, and I said it out loud, quiet. Just for myself. Remember this moment. Then I drove to a comfort inn off the interstate and checked in for what I told myself would be a few nights and turned into 5 weeks. I'm going to skip over the worst of those 5 weeks. Not because they weren't real, but because that's not really what this story is about. There was a stretch where I was eating gas station sandwiches, because the hotel didn't have a kitchen. And I was trying to save what I could. There was a night Marigold got sick from the stress of it all, and I sat on a stiff hotel comforter at 2 in the morning, calling an emergency vet line, crying in a way I hadn't let myself cry since the morning I found Roger. There was a lot of staring at a popcorn ceiling, doing math that never improved no matter how many times I ran it. What I want to tell you about is what came after. I had worked at that hospital system for 26 years. My supervisor, a woman named Charlene, hard-edged but decent, the kind of boss who noticed things, pulled me aside about 10 days into all of this and asked point blank if I was okay, because I clearly wasn't, and I'd been hiding it badly. I told her the short version. She didn't say anything sentimental. She said, "There's a full-time coordinator position opening up in cardiology, better hours, better pay, and there's a relocation stipend program for staff transferring between our regional campuses. You interested, Cincinnati?" I hadn't even known I wanted to leave Ohio's smaller towns until she said it. But something in me said yes before I'd fully thought it through, and for the first time in months, that felt like the right kind of impulsive. I took the job. I took the stipend, which wasn't huge but covered a security deposit and moving costs. I found a one-bedroom apartment 40 minutes from the new hospital campus. Small, a galley kitchen, a single bathroom with tile. The color of weak tea, but it had a lease with my name on it and nobody else's, and the first night I slept there. On a mattress on the floor because the furniture hadn't arrived yet. I slept harder than I had in 14 months. The house sold 3 weeks after I left Carter's driveway. For slightly more than the estimate. Enough to clear the mortgage and leave me with a modest but real cushion in the bank. The first money that had ever belonged entirely to me without a husband's name attached to it. Felicity, my daughter, the one with the 600-square-foot apartment, called me almost every single day during those weeks. She hadn't been able to offer me a place to stay. But she offered something else. She showed up. She drove the 2 hours to help me pack the storage unit. She sat with me on the phone some nights doing nothing, but listening to me cry about her father and her brother in the same breath. When I moved into the new apartment, she took 2 days off work. She couldn't really afford to take and drove up to help me assemble a bookshelf from a box. Badly. Both of us laughing at the instructions that made no sense in any language. "I'm sorry I couldn't take you in, Mom," she said one of those nights, sitting on my unpacked boxes, eating cold pizza. "You did more than take me in," I told her. "You showed up. That's different, and it's worth more." She didn't fully understand what I meant then. I think she does now. Carter called me 9 days after the driveway. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message, careful, rehearsed sounding, about how Imogen had been overwhelmed, about how their house wasn't really set up for an extended guest, about how he hoped I understood it wasn't personal. A grown woman standing on a porch with a cat carrier and a dead husband's grief, locked out by her own son's wife while he watched from a window. I understood it perfectly. That was the problem. I didn't call back for 3 weeks. When I finally did, I kept it short. I told him I'd gotten settled, that I had a new job, a new apartment, that I was managing. I did not tell him about the Comfort Inn, or the gas station sandwiches, or Marigold's emergency vet visit, or any of the things that might have made him feel the appropriate amount of guilt. I've found that people who didn't earn the details of your suffering don't get to have them. "We'd love to have you over sometime," he said, "once things settle down." "Sure," I said. "Sometime." That was 8 months ago. Things have apparently never settled down enough. Imogen sent a card at the holidays. Store-bought, generic, signed in handwriting that wasn't even hers. The kind your assistant signs if you have an assistant for that sort of thing. Except Imogen doesn't have an assistant, so I genuinely don't know whose handwriting that was. I put it on a shelf. I didn't throw it away, but I didn't put it anywhere meaningful either. 6 months after I moved to Cincinnati, the cardiology department lead position opened up, the one Charlene had been hinting I'd be perfect for since my 2nd month. I got it. The raise was substantial enough that I sat in my car in the parking garage for a full minute, after seeing the number on the offer letter. Not because it was life-changing money, but because it was money nobody else had a claim on. Money I'd built back from absolute zero in under a year. I upgraded apartments 4 months ago, a 2-bedroom now, the second room set up as a proper guest space with a real bed, not an air mattress. Because I made a decision that if anyone in my life ever stood on a porch the way I stood on that porch, the door in my house would open. I bought a quilt for that guest bed in a soft sage green. Felicity picked it out. She stays there most weekends now, since she's only 30 minutes away and her roommate situation got complicated. We've gotten closer in this past year than we'd been in the previous 10 combined, which is its own strange gift buried inside everything else. There's a particular kind of vindication that doesn't come with a confrontation. doesn't come with anyone admitting they were wrong to your face. It comes quieter than that. It's a paycheck with your name only on it. It's a lease you signed alone and kept up alone. It's a guest room with the door unlocked. In a life you built from a hotel room and a sick cat. And 3 words you whispered to nobody in a driveway. I don't talk to Imogen much. I'm civil at the handful of family events I still attend. The ones where avoiding each other entirely would draw more attention than just nodding politely over a vegetable tray. Carter and I talk maybe once a month. Careful surface-level conversations about nothing that matters. He's never apologized, not really. Not the kind of apology that names the specific thing it's apologizing for. I've stopped waiting for it. I learned something in that Comfort Inn parking lot that nobody tells you before you need to know it. Waiting for an apology is its own kind of staying somewhere you weren't wanted. I am no longer interested in staying anywhere I had to beg my way into. Last month, Felicity had a gallery showing, a small one, a co-op space downtown but real, her actual design work framed on actual walls with her actual name on little white cards beside each piece. I went obviously, I always go now. One piece near the back was a series of typography prints, words rendered in different fonts and colors. And one of them, off to the side, smaller than the others, stopped me cold. It said, "Some doors close so you can find the one that was always meant to open." She came up beside me while I was looking at it. "I made that one for you," she said. Before I even knew if I'd show it. I didn't say anything for a second. I just looked at my daughter, 30 years old now, standing in a room full of her own work, having built something real out of nothing while also showing up for me every single day I needed her to. "It's good," I finally said. She smiled. "I know, I don't tell this story because I want pity. I have a job I'm good at, a daughter who shows up, a guest room with an unlocked door, and a cat who finally stopped being scared of moving boxes. I'm doing just fine. Genuinely fine, the kind of fine that took 14 months and a hotel parking lot to build. I tell it because I know there are women out there right now standing on some version of that porch, holding a suitcase and a grief too big to name, asking the people who are supposed to love them for one small thing, just a door, just a little room, and watching that door lock instead of open. If that's you, I need you to hear this. It is not the end of something. It is the beginning. Even when it feels like the absolute floor falling out from under you, the people who locked that door are still living the exact same life they were living that night. Same house, same routines, same careful avoidance of anything uncomfortable. I built something entirely new out of a parking lot and a deaf cat. And 3 words I said to nobody. There is no sweeter outcome than that. If someone ever locked a door on you when you needed them most, tell me in the comments what you did with that moment. Because I've come to believe something I didn't understand a year ago. The people who tell you there's no room for 2 are usually just afraid of who you'll become once you go find your own.